Now, interestingly enough, in terms of the spiritual experience, you did have spiritual experience which were induced, referring to
drugs.
Yes, I'm referring, but not just the regular taking of drugs, which is one thing to go to a party, but actually you were part of a scientific experimentation.
Was this on my website? You're good.
So,
Yes, I did.
Fill in the details for us, please.
That was actually that was a bridge from Muktananda to John Roger.
Okay, so we're still on the timeline then.
It's not that Muktananda ever spoke encouragingly of drugs. I never heard such a thing mentioned. But it was during my time with Muktananda, a very dear friend of mine had signed up for a project with Stanford University. It took 6 months to be properly processed, to be accepted in a, I guess, a very experimental thing that they were doing with LSD in Vancouver, since it wasn't allowed here. And I did all the paperwork and I was accepted. So I flew up to Vancouver.
And this was to a friend. A friend said, Leigh, since you're crazy about these experiences, try this.
Yes,
was that
and
the
it
idea?
was another one of those, let's go to India with a backpack.
Another outrageous moment of your life.
Yes, so I just got in a plane, went up there, and it was the top floor of a hospital for alcoholics in Vancouver. And the whole top of the hospital was this place where this gentleman named Dr. Kagan, his nickname was Cappy Kagan. He was 80 at the time, and in fact was the doctor who had given LSD to Aldous Huxley when he died. So he had a certain cachet in the intellectual drug world,
But this was all under Stanford University's watchfulness.
Oh, yes, yeah. And there were doctors, there were a few doctors from Stanford, and they would often use these alcoholic patients, except for the few unexpected patients such as myself who would come. And they would take all kinds of tests on you for the first 2 days. And then the third day, I had the floor to myself. I was interviewed a number of times by Dr. Kagan, and it was a musical therapy. So I was asked, what music during your experience do you wish? And I said, only spiritual music. And they were exceptionally thorough. They didn't say, oh, well, a little gospel here or a little this. They had 7 hours worth of programmed music, of spiritual music from all over the world. And it took me into this room that was soundproofed with a camera where, I would be observed. And I was blindfolded and took a rather large capsule. It was like, here we go. And put on these sound things and laid down. And wow, it was still a wow in retrospect. And I'll share with you some of it because I experienced going through the sheaths of the body. Experienced going through the different levels of the body and out of mind, and these are wordless levels. And one of the experiences that I had, and again, we'll use the word experience loosely. I can't corroborate this and haven't asked actually, but I was in a communication with Abraham, Jesus, Moses, and it was profound, and it was about my spiritual unfoldment. And I remember it, and I remember looking at my parents and the dynamics of their karma and all the people with whom I was having difficulty, and seeing the dynamics and the structure of what they came in to work out that I often felt at the effect of. And this was very liberating because it moved me to a kind of compassion. This was much after the fact, but in the experience as well. And another one of the experiences was just seeing myself just dissolve into the heart of God. And then it was like coming back down. Of course, this was many, many hours. I think it was maybe 8 hours, 9 hours. And one of the experiences that was the most profound was seeing Muktananda giving me away in marriage. I was dressed in the sari he'd given me on a red thing with flowers, and he was walking me down this red carpet. And at the end of the carpet was this man with whom I would be joined in marriage. And suddenly at my side was my son, and a banner of purple light was over my head. And this man whose face I couldn't see was putting a ring on my wedding finger that was amethysts, and purple light was shooting out of the ring. And the marriage took place. And within a month, less than a month, I met John Roger.
And the experience in this room taking LSD was, you saying you were out for 8 or 9 hours, and then they brought you back.
You come back naturally, they force nothing.
And then what did they say? Thank you very much, and they put you in.
No, you're under a lot of observation at that point because you've been through, and the thing they ask you to do first, it's almost as if you've had some kind of surgery and they fuss over you and make sure you eat because you've used a lot of energy, and to write immediately your memories. So I wrote just nonstop as it was very fresh. Everything that I could recall, but it was very fresh. I still have it somewhere. I mean, I just wrote,
They let you keep it then, yeah?
Yes. They took a copy, and then the next day is all physical tests, and 1 day of rest, and then they send you home. Well, I arrived home on a Friday. On Sunday, Sally Kirkland called me, who had been an actress friend of mine for a number of years. I'd made a movie with Robert De Niro, and when Sally came out to make The Sting, De Niro was also her friend. She said, I don't know anybody. He said, well, call this woman. She's a great friend of mine, which she did. And shortly after she came out here, she met John Roger. And she'd been after me for a year. She kept saying, you've got to meet this John Roger. And I'd say, Sally, I'm a one-guru woman. You know, I don't want to hear about it. You know, I'm sure he's lovely for you, dear. I wasn't that patronizing, but it was just like I wanted her to kind of back off.
So you're with McDonando at this point.
Yes.
And you've gone on this LSD
Yes.
experiment. Now, just backtrack. It took you 6 months of applications just to have the LSD experience. Is that
just to be accepted.
Just to be accepted.
Yeah,
so that was quite a process. It wasn't.
Yes, they give you so much paperwork. You're filling out all kinds of background, your family. Can't remember it all, but it was just a huge amount of paperwork.
And then once they let you go, you didn't hear any more from them again? That was it?
You check in about a week or two. They check in with you.
Did they tell you what they had learned from you at all in that
No.
time? They didn't. So you didn't get any feedback, so to speak. So it was kind of like that was complete.
It was for me.
Right.
That you enter it for yourself, for your own revelation. They read all my papers that I wrote, but there was no real contact much after that I recall at all.
I was just curious. I just wanted to bring that phase to completion. So then,
Thank you.
Then into Sally, and then.
So Sally arrives at my home, and I'm recovering. I was like exhausted. I'm actually in bed, and she'd called me and said, "Can I come by?" And I began, as was always the case, this always sort of absolute love of Sally, and also trying to put up kind of like, well, maybe later, you know. She arrived at my door, and I said, come on up, I'm in bed, and she wanted me to play the tape of her wedding. She'd been married at Prana, which I didn't know what that was at this point. I didn't know anything. She played me the tape of her wedding, and I felt this energy, I have to say. I don't remember who did the wedding. Was it you?
Don't think so.
No, her. And she had in her other hand 3 tapes of John Roger, and said, well, I'm not supposed to do this because you're not supposed to hear 3 tapes at once, but I'm just going to leave them here. And I said, well, okay, you leave them here, honey, but I'm not making any promises. So we had a lovely visit, and she left, and I immediately put in a John Roger tape. And I was listening to John Roger until about 1 o'clock in the morning. About 2 in the morning, I'm hiking up Benedict Canyon, going, oh my God, this man is telling the truth. It's not that I hadn't heard truth elsewhere, because indeed I had, but all that kept running through me was, this is truth for me, this is truth for me. I just remember this running through me. I mean, I could barely sleep. There was this inordinate excitement. Called Sally the next morning and said, Sally, when might I be able to meet this John Roger? She was thrilled. And she said, well, it's Monday. There's a seminar on Wednesday night. So I went with Sally that first seminar Wednesday night at
Were you feeling any twinges at this point because you were, after all, this one guru woman?
Yes, I was. I was feeling sort of like you were being unfaithful. Just this kind of, there wasn't trepidation because there was more excitement than there was anything else, but it was caution, kind of, well, telling myself this is a visit, you know. Meeting Sally at Prana, and I was extraordinarily shy in those days. I mean, it was, I was always shy. I mean, it was almost an anathema that I came into the business of being an actress. I think it was an antidote to the severity of my shyness. The desire to express was as great a yearning as spirit later became, was the desire to find a way to an avenue, a channel through which me could come through that felt very inhibited. And my mother was really the only person I felt comfortable speaking with. And of course, she bore the burden of lengthy conversations. But I arrived at Prana. Sally was moving me around. I said, I don't want to be special. Oh, please just let me stay in the line. And, you know, so she backed up, and I went in and I hid behind a pillar that I cherish to this day, because every time I go into Prana, I go, that's where I was hiding. And I hid as far behind that as I could, because I saw where things were. I saw where the big chair was. And I thought, well, I could peek around this pillar, and that will be good enough. And Sally kept trying to bring me up front. I said, no, I'm fine here. And I saw John Roger enter in from the side with a few staff members. And Sally let out, and everybody's in the room. And I'm just sort of in my bubble, hopefully, of hiding. And she just lets out this loud, JR, there's that actress, Leigh Taylor-Young, I was telling you about. She's behind the pillar. And I remember going, oh God, could I disappear? Could I die? Anything, just, you know, it was, and he veered, you know, towards me through the room. And as he came towards me, I felt this just almost blissful excitement. I felt like my eyes were having windshield wipers that were going back and forth. The clarity was, as he approached, was, and I was used to experiencing unusual energy. I don't know that I could say I could tell you in great distinction, but I was familiar when that kind of energy I was near it. And as he approached, it was like so powerful. And he reached out his hand, and he took my hand in both his hands, this is what I remember, and just said, welcome. And I just said, thank you. And inwardly, it felt as if I heard, like home, that we're part of each other, or that I've been waiting, or something so powerful of connectedness. And that was truly what I was, you know, trying to put together as he walked away and got in his chair and began a seminar that I think started with Far, Far Away and Take Your Lunch, which, to share with our audience, is a song that there is no explanation for other than it's the silliest spiritual song I've ever heard in my life, coming from chanting, you know, and sort of things waving in glorious banners of silk and incense. This was an extraordinary beginning of a seminar. Something to that effect took place, but it was so joyful. And he began speaking, and again, this thing was coming inside of me of just blissful joy, excitement at meeting a great love. It's as if you've meeting your great love. It's not like your conscious mind fully knows everything yet, but those were the sensations.